Hey guys, and welcome back to another video. In today's video, we are going to talk about domain and range. Okay, it should be pretty simple, should be pretty fast. I'm going to try to make this quick. But before we jump into that, I just want to let you know, grades have been updated on Skyward. Okay, so at the top here, I put 3 ways that you can improve your grade if you're not a fan of what your grade is right now. Some of you are doing great, and that's awesome. Keep doing what you're doing because it's working, right? Don't change anything. Some of you might be adjusting to a high school class. You might not like where your grade's at, so I'm going to just tell you some things that you can do if you want to improve it. First things first, finish your assignments. I mean, that's a pretty simple one. The main reason I put this on here is because if you look on Skyward and you see zeros or maybe some like low grade assignments, those are not permanent. Okay? I just put those grades there to show you, hey, if you leave the work as it is right now, this will be your grade. Right? So if you keep not doing this assignment, that's going to be the grade you get. Or if you keep this low grade here, instead of redoing it, that's going to be the grade you get. Alright? But those are not permanent. You can redo them or finish them at any time, and I'll update them in Skyward. Second thing is, yes, you can redo assignments. I've tried to explain this, but I'm not sure if everyone is aware of how to do that. So with how to redo Alex assignments, I'm going to post a video about that. Okay? Basically, I'll give you unlimited attempts on every assignment, so you can basically start the assignment over. The good news is that you don't have to do the whole thing. Okay, you only have to do the questions you missed. So let's say that you get only 2 questions wrong out of 10. Well, then when you redo the assignment, you only have to do those 2 questions again, and you can try to get the 100. So my advice is get all of your assignments 100 before working on your pie chart. Okay, because my assignments will match my test, so you'll get good major grades and your daily grades. Okay, so ignore the pie chart if everything's down to 100. Once you do that, then you do your pie chart. And again, if you're not sure how to do the redos, I'm going to make a video on it and post it on Canvas. Lastly is test corrections. Every single test that we take, I will allow test corrections. Okay, so how do you do test corrections? All you do is you take a piece of paper and you say, okay, which questions did I miss? And you basically try to do those questions again, right? So let's say you missed question 5 on the quiz. So you'd say, okay, question 5, you don't have to rewrite the question on the paper. Just tell me that it's question 5. Try to tell me what you think you may have done wrong, if you can remember, right? Your best guess of like what you think you missed. And then show me the steps on how to get the right answer and get the right answer. And then I'll give you half of the points back for that question. So basically, you can earn half points back that you've missed on the quiz. Okay? Now, let's say you miss question 5 and you say, hey, I missed question 5, the answer is this, and you give me no work, or you give me no explanation on what you think you did wrong, you don't get the points, right? I just need you to show me that you can do these problems now, right? You got to just prove it to me that you know how to do it, and I'll give you points back. But if I can't really, if I don't really believe that you know how to do it because there's so little work, well, then I can't really give you the points, okay? But that's basically it. You do it on a piece of paper, you tell me the question number, you show me the work, I go, cool, you know how to do it, so I'll give you the points back, and I'll update your Canvas scores. Alright, if you have any questions on test corrections after that, just send me a Canvas message. I'll try to explain it in more detail, but otherwise, let's get started. That way you don't have to watch a whole long video, like the last couple ones. Alright, so, domain and range. What are those words? Right, that's what we're going to talk about today. This is probably going to be new for basically everyone. This is not something that this is probably not something that your previous classes haven't shown you. Okay, so this is going to be new, but it's okay because it's a pretty easy thing to start off with today. So let's start with domain. What is that word? And how can we understand it? So it says the domain is the set of all possible blank. Well, let's first understand the word set. Okay. The word set just means like a group. Okay, it could be a group of objects. You can kind of think like if you like playing cards, right? You have your set of hearts. All the cards are hearts. You have your set of clubs, or you can make it more number related. You have your set of evens and your set of odds, right? So in math, usually we're going to have a set of numbers or a group of numbers that somehow relate. That's a set. It's just going to be a group of things. Okay? So what are the things that we're going to group together in a domain? Well, if you remember last time, we talked about input and output values. Okay, so the domain basically says what are all the possible input values for whatever function we're talking about. So I give you a function and I say, what's the domain? Well, all you do is you go, what are all the things that I can put into the function? Right? And that's my domain. If you're not sure how that works, that's fine, because we're going to do some examples in a bit. So let's see. It says the domain represents the independent variable. Independent variable, or also known as the x values. That's probably going to be the most helpful thing, right? We can call them input values, we can call them independent variables, but most likely in the math world, we're just going to say x values. The domain is all of the x values that I can use. Again, we'll see what that means. Today, we're going to focus more on a discrete set. Let me zoom in there. So I can list a domain as a discrete set, which is basically just, a few numbers in a group. Or I can list them as an inequality from least to, let's see if I can make this work, greatest. Okay? Now, the inequality part we're not going to tackle yet. It's a little tougher. So we're going to save that for tomorrow. But just know that, yes, we can write them as inequalities. Okay? But today, we're more focused on this discrete set idea. Alright, so there is domain. The main thing for domain is that it uses x. Let's see if I can write that a little nicer. X values. Okay? The main thing with domain is that it uses x values. So if you can probably guess that the range is going to use y values. So let's see. Let's change our colors here. The range will use y values. Technically, it is also a set. And it's tracking all the possible. Instead of input, it wants the output values. So if you remember from our previous video, we had the vending machine, right? And the outputs were like our snacks. So this would be sort of like those sorts of things, right? The function, whatever it spits out, goes into the range, right? So in our example from last time, that would be the snacks. All right, the range represents something called the dependent variable. Dependent variable, which again is basically just the y values. So again, most helpful thing to remember is that it will be the y values, but you can think of them as outputs or the dependent variable. The range can also be listed as a discrete set, which again, what we're doing today, or an inequality from, you guessed it, least to greatest. Again, these inequalities we'll talk about next time. Today, it's just the set. So how do we do this, right? We define them. They kind of make sense, right? Domain is x, range is y. But what do I do with that? Well, let's find out. So we have our example from last time, right? And it says fill the domain and range for the vending machine function. And it has our vending machine off to the right. So let's think about it. Domain is our input. When you go up to the vending machine, what is the thing that you input? Okay? What is the thing that we are going to do before the machine gives us something? Now, you could say money. That's true. You have to give the machine money. But after you give the machine money, what do you tell the machine? How does it know what to give you? Well, you have to say the code, right? So one code I could use would be A1, right? That's what I have to type in to let the machine know what I want. So I'm going to say, well, one thing I can plug in is A1. Another thing I could plug in would be A2. A3, and I also have B1, B2, and B3. Right? Those are all of the possible, remember that word from before, possible inputs that I can use. So that would be my domain. Okay? Hopefully we're starting to see the picture. All of the possible inputs into the function is my domain. So let's find out the range. The range asks for outputs. So when I think about for every single input that I put into this vending machine, right, every single code, what will I get out of it? What does the machine give to me in the end? Well, for A1, it's going to give me M&Ms. So I could say one output would be M&Ms. How do you draw that? You know what? Just pretend that looks like an and sign. It's hard to write on this thing. M&Ms. And if I go to A2, well, I get trail mix. So I'm just going to put TM for trail mix. If I go to A3, I'll get chips. If I go to B1, it will give me Skittles. If I go to B2, I get Snickers, and then B3 is Twix, so we said Snickers and Twix. So it's kind of review. I see a vending machine. The thing that I can input would be the different codes for the vending machine. So A1, A2, A3, and so on. Those would be my inputs, so they go into my domain, because it's just tracking all the inputs. For my range, it tracks the outputs. So what does the machine give me at the end of the function? Well, it's going to give me a snack. So what are all the possible snacks that I could get from this vending machine? Well, I have M&Ms, trail mix, chips, Skittles, Snickers, and Twix. Right? And that's the basic idea of what we're going to do today. But instead of codes and snacks, we're just going to use numbers. Alright? So we're going to do a few examples. It's pretty simple. Once I get through those, it's up to you. Alright, so let's just speed through this. So domain is my x values. So let's just kind of remind ourselves. This will be x, and my range will be y. So when I sit here and I go, well, what are all the x values? Now I'm going to say I have -2. I have 0. I have 3. I have 6. And I have 8. How did I get those x values? Well, it says x, and all of these numbers are in its row. That simple. The only thing that you have to do when you write domain and range, when it's just a few numbers, is you have to add these little fancy brackets. Okay? This is what tells us that it's a set. Usually it's not a big deal, but when you do your Alex assignment, it's very picky about like, hey, tell me this is a set. Well, how do I tell you that? It's with the fancy brackets. So just be careful of that on Alex. If you get a question wrong, it's probably because you missed the fancy brackets. All right. Well, range we said is y. So I go, what are my y values? I have 6, 0, -4, -8, and -9. But it's not a set until I draw the little fancy brackets. And now I'm done. It's that easy. Right? Let's do a few more. I go to question 2. I say, well, what is domain? That's just x. What is range? That's just y. Oop. That's just y values. Okay, so let's sit here. What are all the x values that I can use? Well, I have 0, -2, 3, -5. So I say, well, I need my fancy bracket. I have 0, -2, 3, -5. There you go. Now we go to the y's. I have 0. I have 8. I have -12, and I have 20. So I say 0, 8, -12, and 20. And we're done. Simple as that. If you get the idea by now, I would just go to the assignment. I'm just going to talk for a little bit longer in case you're still having trouble. But I think you kind of get the idea at this point. So feel free to go ahead and jump to the assignment if you think you got it. Oh, is it not going to zoom in? Okay, we'll try our best with this. I just might have to write the range somewhere else. Okay, so domain is X. Range is Y. I'll just try to put that over here. So my domain will be my X values. So 3, -2, -2, there we go. 7, and -4. And I put it in its fancy brackets. And then my range is my Y values, which are these right here. So 0, -5, -8. Sometimes students ask me, like, do you need to write the -8 twice since it has 2 arrows? You do not, okay? Because if we think back to our definition, it only wants the possible values. It does not want how many times I use that value, okay? It just wants me to say, hey, is a -8 possible in the range? It is? Okay, cool, write it. I don't need to know how many times you can write it. I just need to know that it's possible. Okay, so you do not need to write -8 multiple times. You only have to write it once. All right, let's see. Can I zoom out? It's being difficult. We'll skip 4 because it's being difficult and your assignment doesn't have that anyway. So, zoom out of that real quick. If you're still having trouble or maybe you've hit a roadblock on the ALEKS assignments, all I'm going to do now is just kind of see what some of the problems from your assignment looks like, okay, in case you're having trouble. So the first one is pretty similar to what we've done. It just has a bunch of numbers, or a bunch of coordinate points, and we have to find the domain and range, okay? Main thing people forget on this question, you see this guy right here? That icon, that gives you the fancy brackets, okay? A lot of students forget to put the fancy brackets, okay? The other thing that you forget is the commas to separate your answers. So let's go through this and just kind of make sure we have the right notation. So domain would be X. So I'm just going to put D for domain, and I'm going to say that it's my X values. I have to put my fancy bracket. Okay, don't forget the fancy bracket. And then I'm just going to go through and say, what are all my X values? Well, remember, the coordinate point is X, comma, Y. So all of the first numbers or variables in the first spot are going to be my X values. So I go through and say, well, I have a 5, I have a 1, I have an A, and I have an 8. Okay. And now I move on to my range, which is the Y values. So I'm going to say R, oops, does that not fit? It doesn't fit. Okay, we'll write it up. Where am I going to write it? I'll write it over here. Okay, so there's my range, which is Y values. Okay, see how they're in the second spot in the coordinate point? So I put my fancy bracket, and I go through and I say, what are all my Y values? What are all the second spots in the coordinate point? 5, A, 0, and B. And I write my fancy bracket. And just notice that I'm also putting commas in between each of my answers. You will have to do that as well. Okay, so the main thing on this question that people mess up is just the notation. You gotta draw your sets, like your little fancy brackets, and you gotta add your commas. Usually that's what people mess up. Okay? That one's pretty easy. And then we go on to the second one. This one's a little different, but remember, it's the same idea. Domain wants X values, range wants Y. Well, this is just a grid with coordinate points, okay? Except this time you have to figure out what the coordinate points are. But I'm pretty sure we know how to read a grid. So let's just go through and read this grid. What are the coordinate points on it? So, first things first, I'm just going to say, well, this coordinate point right here. Oh, I didn't write. There we go. This coordinate point right there would be -3, -4, again, because we have X and then Y. And X values, if you notice right here, go left and right. And Y values go up and down. All right. So I went -3 left, which is my X. And then I went -4 down, which is the Y. That's one coordinate point. The other coordinate point is 1, comma 4. And then we have the last coordinate point of, not 0, 4, comma 0. Okay? Now that I have my coordinate points, it should be pretty similar to what we just did, right? And having to write our domain and range. So I say, well, domain is x values. I have to draw my fancy bracket, and I just go through and say, what are my x values? It's these numbers right here. -3, 1, and 4. And I make fancy bracket. Then I do the same thing for range. I have my range, which is my y values. What are my y values? Well, I already listed them out. I have -4, 4, and 0. And there you go. You just told me what are all the possible x values, and then what are all the possible y values if you gave me this graph. Okay? And that's basically domain and range. So if you have any questions, send me a Canvas message, or rewatch the video, or ask your group mate. But I think this is pretty simple, right? You're basically just looking at the numbers and saying if they're x or y, and then putting them in a group. The main thing that I want you to get from this is knowing that domain is x values and range is y. Okay? If there's one thing to take away, it's that thing. Because it will help us in the future lessons, because we're going to be doing domain and range for a while. So we want to get comfortable with those words. But other than that, that's all I got. Good luck on the assignment, and send me a Canvas message if you need anything. Have a great day.